Bradford appeal this afternoon. This is £1,000 from one item from Redtronic, a firm based in Bradford. If you want to top 1,000, you've got to ring now because we're putting the clock on it. Worth 1,500.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And that's gone. The computer worth £1,500. It's gone for £1,000, and that £1,000 going to no firms, but it's going to the Bradford City Disaster Fund. £1,000 from a firm based in Bradford called Redtronic, and they paid £1,000. And once again, that grand total so far, it brings us to a total of £5,800. We started on air this afternoon with this auction at 2:05. It's now 5:31. We've raised £5,800 thanks to the courtesy and the help of people listening to Radio Air and firms and companies in the area. Thank you for that. Right, we move on to another auction item, and this one is £100 worth of golfing vouchers for use on a weekday at the Moorallerton Golf Course in Leeds. Worth £110. We're starting at 40. So, courtesy of the Moorallerton Golf Course in Leeds, £100 worth of golfing vouchers for use on a weekday. We're starting at £40. Mrs. Lawton is back. Mrs. Lawton is back with £300. £300, still £200 cheaper than it would cost you. £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. Mrs. Lawton at 300. Mrs. Lawton at 300. We thank the Morley Glass Centre, and John's in at 350. John at 350. Does Mrs. Lawton want to come back? Any new bidders? Still £150 cheaper than it would cost you. John at 350. It's worth 500. Can I see any offers over 350? Can I see offers over 350? I've got 370. I've got 370 from Mrs. Ellis. Mrs. Ellis at 370. Does John want to come back? What about Mrs. Lawton? I've got 370 from Mrs. Ellis. I've got 370. Can I see 380? Can I see offers over 370? Can I 370? Can I see 375? I've got 400. I've got 400. Mrs. Ryan, 400. It's worth £500. We're £100 cheaper. Mrs. Ryan's holding it at 400. Now's your chance to get back. John, Mrs. Lawton, Mr. Ellis, do you want to come back? What about Chris? What about Claire? Mrs. Ryan's holding it at 400. £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. Worth 500. I've got 400 at the moment. Mrs. Ryan at 400. Can I see 410? Can I see 410? We'll put the clock on it. Can I see 410? Can I see 410? Mrs. Ryan at the moment. John, Ellis, Mrs. Ellis, Mrs. Lawton. I've got 410. I've got 410. I've got 410. Who's that from? Mrs. Ryan at 400. She's been knocked out by a 410 bid. What about John? What about Mrs. Lawton? Mrs. Crook's come in, a new bidder. Mrs. Crook at 410. 410. It's £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. Well, thanks to them, we've got up to 410 for the Bradford City Disaster Fund. 410 from Mrs. Crook. Can I see 420? Can I see 420? What about Mrs. Ryan? Another £20 and yours again. Mrs. Crook at the moment at 410. Mrs. Crook at 410. Can I see 420? Mrs. Ryan, she want to come back? What about John? What about Mrs. Lawton? Mrs. Crook's holding it at 410, and I've got a new bidder, Mrs. Clare, I think it was, Mrs. Clare at 450. 450 from Mrs. Clare, a new bidder, 450. Can I top 450? Can I top 450? Can I see 460? What about Mrs. Crook? What about Mrs. Ryan? What about John? What about Mrs. Lawton? What about Mr. Ellis? Morley Glass Centre, £500 with the double glazing and patio doors. I've got Mrs. Clare on 450. Can I see 460? 460 and secure it. 460 will secure it for you. Ring now, 455 362. Mrs. Clare at the moment at 450. What about Mrs. Crook? Does she want to come back? We're at 450 at the moment. Mrs. Clare at 450. It's worth £500. £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. Worth £500. Mrs. Clare at 450. Mrs. Clare at 450. Does anyone want to come back and make it 460? Mrs. Crook at 410. Mrs. Crook at 410. What about Mrs. Clare at 450? Does she want to come back? Mrs. Crook at 410. Mrs. Crook at 410. Mrs. Clare at 450. Mrs. Clare at 450. Offers over 450. Does Mrs. Crook want to come back? Mrs. Clare's holding it at 450. What about Mr. Lawton? What about Chris? What about Claire? Mrs. Clare's holding it at the moment at 450. What about Mrs. Crook? She's at 410. Does she want to come back? Mrs. Clare at the moment at 450. £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. £500 on Radio Air this afternoon for the Bradford Fund. We got it up to 450. Can I see a penny over 450? Can I see 460? Can I see 460? 450 at the moment. We have to put the clock on it in a minute. Mrs. Crook, does she want to come back? Mrs. Clare at the moment at 450. 450 at the moment. Mrs. Ryan, does she want to come back? John, does he want to come back? What about Mrs. Ellis? Mrs. Clare at the moment at 450. Can I see 460? Can I see 460? Can I see any offers over 450? Can I see any offers over 450? Worth £500. £50 cheaper than market price at the moment from the Morley Glass Centre. Worth 500. I got 450. I got 450. Can I see anything over 450? Can I see anything over 450? Mrs. Clare at 450 at the moment. What about Mrs. Crook? Does she want to come back? What about Mrs. Ryan? What about John? What about Mr. Lawton? What about Chris? What about Claire? Do they want to come back? Mrs. Clare's holding it at the moment at 450. 450 at the moment. Does anybody want top 450? Want top 450? 455 362 is the number. £500 with the double glazing and patio doors from the Morley Glass Centre. Worth £500. £500. Mrs. Clare at 450. We're going to have to put the clock on it. Mrs. Clare at 450.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Having to stop the clock because calls are still coming in, and obviously on amount of money like this we have to check that they're not hoaxes and they're real calls. We've had some cracking calls this afternoon, real cracker calls. Mrs. Ryan, Mrs. Croak, Mrs. Clare at 450 at the moment. Do any of those previous calls want to come back? Is this a call over 450? And we've got another call from John at 470. We've got it up to 470. Can we see that 500? Are we going to see that 500 or not? Are we going to see that 500? We got it to 470. John at 470 at the moment. What about Mrs. Clare? Does she want to come back? What about Mrs. Crook? What about Mr. Ryan? What about Mrs. Lawton? John's got it at 470. It's worth 500, still £30 cheaper. If you're thinking of double glazing or patio doors, ring now. Any offer over 470? Are we going to see over at 470, or is it going to go to John? What about Mrs. Clare? Does she want to come back? She held it for so long, but she was picked at the post at 470. 470 it stands at.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And the double glazing, courtesy of the Morley Glass Centre, goes to John at a bid of £470, and he gets for that £500 for the double glazing, courtesy of the Morley Glass Centre. That's John Piggott, thanks to him, as we move on to our next item. 10 to 6, this is a day out at a Leeds Rugby League home match with hospitality. There's a buffet and wine worth £100, and this is for 6 people, courtesy of the Leeds Rugby League Club in aid of the Bradford City Football Disaster Fund, valued at 100. We're starting this at 40, so it's a day out at a Leeds Rugby League home match with hospitality, a buffet and wine worth £100. This is for 6 people, and it's courtesy of the Leeds Rugby League Club, worth 100. If you're interested, we're starting at 40. We're starting at 40. Offers over 40 on 455 362. Offers over £40, 455 362. Ring now. Our instant sale, a backrest in brown cord. Mrs. Triggs in Garforth gave us that. It's £15 if you're interested in the backrest. 457 822 is the number. 457 822. Call us now. And another instant sale from Collier's in Leeds on Kirkstall Road. They've given us a sports jacket. This is grey and black fleck, and it's valued at £35. And the first call with 25, it's medium, and the jacket is yours. A sports jacket, grey and black fleck from Collier's in Leeds, valued at 35. Can I see £25? 457 822 is the number. 457 822 for the sports jacket, and also for the backrest as well. £10 for the backrest, and it's yours. £10 the backrest in brown cord. And the first call in with 10, and that secures the backrest, the sports jacket in grey and black fleck from Collier's. That's £35 jacket, the first call at 25, and it's yours. Now the total at the moment, as we approach 8 minutes to 6, £6,483. That's what the firms and the listeners of Radio Air have raised since 2 o'clock this afternoon. 6,483, which is 53. He wants the sweater. What about Neil? Does Neil want to come back in top 53? It's between Neil and Mike. Neil on 52, Mike on 53. Does Neil want to come back? Neil wants to come back. He's on 55. Neil on 55. Does Mike want to come back? Neil's holding it at 55. We have to carry on the countdown. Mike's holding it at 53. Neil at 55. Mike wants to come back. Mike's at 60. Mike's holding it at £60. Mike Hurley at £60. And the money for charity. Neil at 55. Does Neil want to come back and top 60? Does Neil want to come back and top that £60? Mike Hurley is holding it at £60. Mike Hurley at 60. Does Neil want to come back and top the 60? Mike Hurley holding it at £60. The Welsh International Rugby Union jersey. Neil wants to come back. He's back at 62. Neil's back at 62. Does Mike Hurley want to come back and top 62? Neil at 62. Does Mike Hurley want to come back? Neil at 62. Mike at 60. Neil at 62. Mike at 60. If Mike wants to come back. He's coming back at 63. Mike Hurley at 63. Does Neil want to come back? If he wants that jersey, he's going to have to pay an extra £1. It's going to be 64. Mike Hurley at 63. If Neil wants to come back, Neil says 65. Neil says 65. He's determined that Mike isn't going to get it. If Mike wants it, he's going to have to pay more than 65. It's Neil at 65. We're halfway through the countdown. We're going to carry on the countdown. Mike comes back. Mike comes back at 70. Mike at 70. Does Neil want to come back at top 70? We're going to put the clock on it. Mike Hurley's holding it at 70.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And that's another £70, courtesy of our own Mike Hurley, into the Bradford City Disaster Fund this afternoon. Thanks, Mike. That's another £70 as we move on. The time is 7.5 minutes past 6.
Some flowers from her country home Chequers outside the ground and standing in silent prayer for a few moments. She talked of a message she saw driving into the city.
Unity in tragedy, and that's exactly what I found in Bradford. Everyone coming together. Indeed, there's a oneness. and everyone doing everything they can to help.
And the directors of Bradford City Football Club are sharing in that spirit, talking of spending £5 million to rebuild Valley Parade Ground as a tribute to the fans who died. Mark Mardell, IRN, Bradford.
Dozens of people have been injured as safety barriers gave way in the crush of ecstatic fans celebrating Manchester United's triumphant homecoming after their FA Cup victory. Jubilant supporters surged forward as the team mounted a platform in front of the City Hall, and one even managed to grab the FA Cup before being hustled away by police. Several people were trampled in the stampede, 20 have been taken to hospital, and more than 100 others treated on the spot. Justin Carrigan was watching as the fans swarmed towards their heroes.
And what was a moment of celebration turned into a moment of panic in a way, because the fans have run over the barriers, they've broken down, the police are trying to hold them back at the moment. They're actually on the podium. The players have had to escape back into the town hall, which is just behind the podium, and the police are doing a desperate job to try and keep the supporters away, and heaven knows what they're going to have to do now, because the whole thing has turned into chaos.
An Egyptian court has confiscated new editions of the centuries-old Arabian classic 1001 Nights because it says the book is racy and full of pornographic material. The Cairo Moral Squad says parts of the 700-year-old book could corrupt young people with accounts of passionate sexual relations. Booksellers trying to distribute the new editions have been fined £500. Independent Radio News.
Hollywood Oscars and awards to television and the theatre industry, it's now radio's turn to take a bow. Tonight, the Sony Awards are being presented at London's Grosvenor House Hotel. To find out how and who has won, we go live to London and join our commentator, Dickie Arbiter.
The Grosvenor House Hotel, 25 categories, 4 awards to ILR, and they were Best Magazine Programme, to Radio 4th in Edinburgh, coming down to receive it was Tom Steele, to Radio Mercury, Timbo, and Local DJ of the Year, to Alan Bezick of Red Rose Radio, Local Radio Personality of the Year, and to Dave Loyne of Independent Radio News, Radio Reporter of the Year. That's it. Good night from the Grosvenor House Hotel.
Dickie Arbiter, our commentator from London's Grosvenor House Hotel with the Sony Awards.
The Midnight News, this is Bill Bingham. A recording of Ian Botham's attack on the England cricket selectors is being made public for the first time. It was made by a freelance journalist who smuggled a tape recorder into a private dinner in Manchester on Friday. Botham says he'll sue. But as the Test and County Cricket Board prepare to decide whether to discipline Botham again, the tape has been tracked down by ITN.
We bring him out of the loft, they take the dust sheet off, they give him a pink gin and sit him there. And he sits there at Lord's, hey, that's splendid. What do you think of that? Oh, is that Botham? Oh, yeah. Look at his hair, look at his hair. Oh, yeah, he's had some of that cannabis stuff, they tell me. Yeah. It comes to the end of the season, about September time, they say, oh, we'll send those poor buggers off to India for 3 months. Because you don't see them in Pakistan. They're not stupid. We go out there and get dysentery and cholera, typhoid, the works. They've made this major decision on who goes abroad, and they get them down, they put another sheet over their heads, pink gin, and put them in the loft till next April. That is the England selectors.
Ray Stroud.
And a look at the weather word, another warm afternoon but also unsettled, outbreaks of rain, top temperatures 16 centigrade, 66 Fahrenheit.
Tonight's Yorkshire Evening Post. Do you know what you're missing if you miss it?
Broadcasting from the centre of Leeds on 362 metres medium wave, 8 to 8 kilohertz, and in stereo 94.6, we are the county's number one, and we are Radio Wow.
The 1 o'clock news, this is Philip Connell. Radio News, it's 1:05.
Solid gold.
Radio.
Point it towards the satellites above the Earth. Well, on the line to us this morning to tell us more is Roger Ashby from Satellite Technology Systems. Roger, morning. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning.
Is it catching on here or not?
It's growing quite fast. The prices have come down since last year, and I think that's the reason that the public are becoming more aware and buying the equipment now.
Okay, so how much does well, when I say dish, I mean I'm talking about all the trappings and everything that go with it. How much does it cost?
Well, a complete system now, installed, including VAT, will cost about £1,000. If you have motor drive and a few extra bits and pieces, probably as high as £1,200.
Right. Do you need a licence to have this?
What you need is the government require you to register once that you have the equipment, and that's a £10 licence fee.
And that's sort of not an annual thing, but indefinitely?
That's indefinitely.
Right. What can you actually pick up?
There's a whole variety of programming now. It goes from sport through various European programs, a lot of movie programs, films. There are children's programs in the morning, ladies' magazine channels, and news from America, which is for 24 hours.
Right.
So there's a whole wealth of programming.
Can you put the aerial on the actual roof of a house, the dish on the roof of a house?
Yeah, this is a misconception. Generally speaking, as long as the dish can get a view to the sky, it doesn't have to be on the roof. So it can be in your garden, and it can be hidden behind, wattle fencing or bushes.
Yeah.
So you can put it anywhere you like, really.
Because I would have thought it was almost easier to put it in the garden than on the roof of a house.
It's much easier because you also get shielded from higher winds.
Yeah. So can everybody's house see, or everybody's garden see a satellite?
Yes, I think about, in the UK, 95% of all houses can actually sight a dish and get onto a satellite with ease.
Now, I mean, some people listening are going to think, well, if I reckon I could make one of them myself. I mean, is it fairly primitive equipment, or is it very sophisticated equipment?
It's very, very sophisticated. You're catching, if you can imagine, the satellite is 23,000 kilometres out in space. It's like trying to find a glowing cigarette 23,000 kilometres away.
Good heavens.
So it's rather difficult.
So presumably you have to have an expert to come in and point this thing at it.
Well, not normally. We have a chain of distributors throughout the country, and they come to Bristol for a day's training. And as long as they know how to use a compass and can incline the satellite upwards, they can tune the thing in about 2 to 3 hours.
Mm.
But they're trained personnel.
Does the satellite stay in the same place all the time, or does it move round as we move round?
It moves down as we move. They're geostationary, so in fact your dish doesn't move, the satellite moves, and we move at the same time.
Well, what happens if the satellite moves faster than we move? Then presumably you have to have your aerial re-altered, or doesn't that happen?
No, it can't happen. No, that's fundamentally, it can't happen.
Right. Now, I understand that many of these transmissions are actually designed for the cable stations, and they're not too happy that members of the public are picking them up, so are thinking of scrambling the pictures so we couldn't get them on our dish, which would in fact mean that we'd spend a lot of money on something that was going to be useless. Is that right?
Well, it depends on the station. Some of the British stations, they give the user an option to pay a monthly fee of about £8, which will give you up to 60 new films per month. It gives you the sport, it gives you pop, and I think that's very good value for money.
But nobody's going to know if you don't pay that money, are they?
That is correct. But you also have a lot of European channels from France and Holland who are quite keen for the British to watch their programming. In the new year, we have Luxembourg, which goes up with 16 channels. And I think we're going to go back to the old Radio Luxembourg type of days, where our programming will be driven by advertising revenue. So I foresee that we're going to have plenty of information, and the consumer will have the choice to pay free of advertising or, take advertising like we have now on British television.
Because one of the things that people have vision of with this satellite job is that, yes, you can get pictures, but the quality is poor, and the everything is in foreign and double Dutch,
No, in fact, the quality is much higher than we get in England off air. If your equipment is set up properly, if you think that the signal is only coming through about 5 or 8 miles of atmosphere, whereas in Yorkshire yours are being sent by land-based transmitters. It's come from London first. It's been pushed up all the atmosphere and smog up to Yorkshire, and you get a much clearer signal off satellite.
I must admit, I saw this satellite TV for the first time at the weekend, and I couldn't believe how clear it was. It was just extraordinary.
Yes. And also the power of the satellite. I mean, you can cover the whole of Europe, and it works off the third of a normal light bulb for energy.
You're joking?
No.
Good heavens. Are we going to get to the stage where, like when BBC Two started, just the few privileged had it, and now everybody's got BBC Two? Are we going to get to the point where everybody has a satellite dish?
I would think in 5 to 10 years, we'll all have our television via satellite. Even BBC and IBA, in 10 years' time, their transmissions will come via satellite. It's pure technology that the cost of sending transmissions is so much cheaper once you pay for the satellite.
It's an extraordinary subject. Roger, thank you for joining us this morning and giving us an insight to it. Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
我請你大家開心機 Lost on Radio
With the number one.
譬如喺度飲茶，我請你大家開心機 Lost on Radio.
Give you details about that and all about Eve coming into the studio. As I promised this evening, we have an interview coming up with All About Eve. They've got that excellent single out at the moment, Wild Hearted Woman. Going to be chatting with them very, very shortly. 7:11 from air with Carl Kingston. 7:17. It's an excellent album out at the moment from All About Eve. A great single as well, Wild Hearted Woman. Your chance to hear that again in a few seconds. Then we'll be chatting with All About Eve live in the Radio Air studios.
Radio Air.
Excellent song from All About Eve, and that's called Wild Hearted Woman. Joining us in the studio is a wild hearted woman herself from All About Eve. It's Julianne. Welcome to Radio Air, Julianne.
Thank you.
I know you're gigging in Leeds this evening, aren't you, a little bit later on tonight?
We are. We're at the Poly, and we're on at 9:30. So
right.
Cutting it a bit fine, but I promise I'll be there.
Is Leeds a place you've played quite a few times?
It is, actually. It was one of our first big gigs. We played at the university supporting the mission nearly a year ago.
Of course, they're doing very well as well at the moment,
They
aren't
are doing awfully well, hoping to follow in their footsteps that way. But yes, maybe the third time we've been back here.
Where are All About Eve from? Where are you originally based?
Well, there's a bit of a local connection. Two of the chaps in the band, Tim the guitarist and Andy the bassist, they're from Huddersfield. Mark the drummer is a Lancashire lad, and I'm from Coventry, but we're all down in London. That's where we met, and that's where we live now.
How did you actually meet? College or something like that?
No, nothing that kind of traditional, really. Just I was looking for a guitarist to work with, and Tim was a friend of a friend, and everybody else was a friend of his friend, so that's how we got together.
I know you've had quite a few indie singles out over the years as well, haven't you?
Yes, we have. We had about 2, I think. When Life Was a Struggle a few years ago. That was on a label based in York, a small label, yes.
Of course, now signed to a major record label with your album out at the moment as well, which is getting very, very good reviews. How long did it take you to get the album together?
It's songs that we'd written perhaps over an 18-month period, and when we put them down, it was kind of, this is the story so far. And it was recorded over about 3 months, not solidly, we're not that decadent, we just kept having to come back to London and then going out to the country. And
of course, you spend a lot of time on the road, don't you?
Yes, we do, more and more so these days, but we certainly made sure we got out to the country to do the album. That's the atmosphere we wanted.
So how long are you spending on the road at the moment? Is this part of a major tour?
Oh, it is. It's what they call the album tour, which seems quite major to me. When we're not getting home till March the 5th. So it's quite a stint, yes.
Do you enjoy life on the road, or is it just something that you're more and more used to as you spend more time on the road?
I get more used to it. I think when we first started, we did all the things you're supposed to do, like stay up all night and drink as much as you can, which was a bit irresponsible of us. And now we're much more moderate, and it's more enjoyable, really, yes.
Do you find being on the road helps you to be creative? It helps you to write, or some bands actually stop writing on the road, but other bands, other writers actually find that the experiences they're having on the road help them to find new material, get new ideas.
I don't know, they're kind of more your Whitesnake bands who write songs about hotel rooms and vans and women and things.
What we smashed up last night.
It's not really our style at all, no. We sit at home in a very casual, relaxed atmosphere to write our songs.
So how do you write? Is it collectively?
It's very democratic, as much as it can be with 4 individuals involved, yes. Basically, usually the 3 chaps get the stuff together. I come in and do my bit, which is the singing and the keyboards, and then there's kind of a vote, and if it's passed, it becomes a song.
Very democratic.
Very.
What's the story behind the single Wild Hearted Woman?
Well, it's about a certain type of woman. It's definitely not about me. I'm not awfully wild. I just have my moments. It's about that kind of self-destructive personality, and I suppose the biggest example would be somebody like Janis Joplin. We popped her in the video to give people a hint of what it was about.
A lot of people thought it was about Marilyn Monroe as well.
It could quite easily apply to her, yes. We just chose Janis.
So what's happening now? Have you started to assemble more material for the next album? Because I know it's a very forward-thinking industry we're in, where you have to, you get the first album out, and already you're possibly thinking about the next album.
Well, we're very hungry to write again. We enjoy it so much that even at sound checks, we've started writing songs, because we don't really need to go through the stuff we know every night. So at any given opportunity, we'll take it to write. So we've got a little stockpile building up already. We can definitely promise you another album.
So what about the live act? Does that consist of mainly material that is on the album now?
Yes, mainly it is. We drag up a few old favourites. The crowd pleasers are there as well, but we are using it to showcase perhaps some of the gentler stuff that people aren't aware that we do. But we're very careful to have a balance of the very rocky side, which we're capable of, and the very delicate side.
What about success outside of the UK? Are there any markets that are good for you in Europe?
We're a new commodity there, actually. When we finish this tour, we're having a little break, and then we're having a month-long tour of Europe with local lads the Mission, I'm afraid, again. So that should be riotous.
Have you actually not been to Europe before? Will this be the first time?
No, not at all. So it's quite exciting. One member of the band, Andrew, the bassist, has never even been on an airplane, so he's very excited, as you can imagine.
Well, lots of luck with the album, which is out at the moment, of course. And again, you're on stage this evening.
9:30.
At the Leeds Poly. Julianne from All About Eve, thanks very much indeed for coming in to chat with us. Let's play another track from the album.
All right.
And the Clouds from All About Eve, a reminder they're on stage this evening at 9:30 at the Leeds Polytechnic. A little bit later on, got 2 copies of the album from All About Eve, which Julianne has very kindly autographed for us. Got 2 copies of the album to give away. 7:31. A couple of copies of the All About Eve album to give away, as I mentioned earlier. We'll do that around about 9:30 this evening also. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a couple of copies of the All About Eve album to give away, autographed by Julianne. If you want these albums, all you have to do is give me a call and say, I want to claim those albums. See those jelly babies? I told you I had problems with those in the end. All you have to do is give me a call and say, I want to claim those albums. Be the first 2 callers on Leeds 455 362, and you will win an autographed copy of the All About Eve album, containing the great hit single at the moment, which you played earlier, of course, Wild Hearted Woman, also the other track we played in the Clouds as well. Leeds 455 362 is the number to call. Be the first 2 callers on that number, and you will win a copy of the All About Eve album, courtesy of Radio Hour. Winning copies of the All About Eve album, Pam Lewington of Liversedge. Congratulations to you, Pam. And also David Wright from Wakefield, both winning copies of the All About Eve album. Thank you very much indeed for all the calls coming in as well.
Me somewhere, and then just to leave me. Okay. He'll just have to do that.
David Waite says there's no doubt it's his brother speaking.
Yes, it is. That's my brother's voice. It's a reminder that he has been missing for as long as he has.
Foreign Office experts will now be studying the recordings.
It's every day, don't I? I get paid for every house I do, I get the same amount of money. Do you know how much that is?
How much is it?
Loads!
You're also fast becoming...
Shut your face.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, no, you're a lady. I can't talk to you like that. Sorry, lady.
Doing up the ass is my bread and butter. Me birds bites free and me cars are nutter. Loads of money is a shout I utter as I wave my wand to the geezers in the gutter.
You're fast becoming quite a famous character in the country.
Yeah.
What do you think of the sort of press attention you're getting?
Well, it's good, right, because I'm great. So it's lovely for people to read about me, because I'm so great.
Are there any things that you'd like to keep away from them that you don't want them to know about?
Well, obviously, you know, I have to be, you know, I like to talk about my private life a bit, like all the birds, but obviously I can't mention by name all the newsreaders and things like that that I've done it with, because, you know, they don't want it to get out. And, you know, a lot of them, they don't want that, so I don't talk about all the celebrity birds I got. And I've got loads of them. Loads.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh, I'm just going out the room now. I'll send that Ponce Harry Enfield in. Hello.
Hello. Is he one of your favourite characters, this monster that you've created?
Well, yeah, I quite enjoy doing him because it lets me be loud and rude and horrible. But I don't like him.
How do you think other people see him, really?
Well, I think they see him as what he is, which is a sort of Mickey take of that kind of person. And, you know, a lot of people have said, oh, no, you've created this monster. It was supposed to be a satire, but now people are believing in him. And I think that's rubbish. I don't think they believe. They know I'm taking the mickey. You know, I think people are credited with too little intelligence.
But there have been lots of rumours that you're going to chop him out.
Yeah,
loads of money, because you are a bit worried that people are actually taking him seriously and admiring him.
No, I'm not that worried about that. You see, this is what the press says, and it's not actually true. They somehow think that working class people, because I'm doing something working class people can't see the irony because they're thick or something. Well, I think that's a really snobbish attitude. I think, of course, people can see the irony in him.
You've created 3 definitive characters now. Loads of Money is one, and Bugger All Money is another. He's the latest.
Bugger All, aye?
He's a Geordie.
Geordie. Aye, he's a Geordie from up there, and he hates that Loads of Money bloke because he's a flipping handbag. He wouldn't say flipping, actually. He's a right bloody woman's handbag, that bloke. Not smirking tabs on that, like me.
How does Stavros go down? Because in a way, Harry, that's been one of the more controversial characters in the sense that he really took off.
I think everything I do is controversial.
It is a bit.
It appears to be, you know.
But Stavros, there was this whole feeling that perhaps you were exploiting a cultural stereotype with Stavros.
I don't think it's a cultural stereotype at all. I think that's a kind of racist attitude to say that a kebab shop owner is all Greeks and that's a stereotype of Greek people. Stavros is based on Adam Athanasiou, who's a friend of mine in Hackney, now in Walthamstow, but he used to run my kebab bar and he's a really funny bloke. The point of Stavros is like Adam. I used to laugh with Adam, not at him, not at what he said, but because he made funny jokes. So instead of, isn't he stupid, it was because he'd say, you know, when there were people fighting in the shop, please, no love making my shop, thank you. You know, and he was making jokes and he knew he was making jokes. You know, of course he didn't laugh at that, like you would laugh at anyone.
There was a rumour about the royal family actually taking into their hearts
ridiculous.
as well. True or false?
Story in one of the less reputable Sunday papers that the Queen, it was a brilliant story, they had a picture of me and a picture of Prince Philip with a moustache on and my hair to look like Stavros, and it was that the Queen was going around saying, hello matey peeps, where is Prince Philip's kebab, innit? A member of the household staff could have sworn she heard the Queen say, you know, I mean, completely made up.
It's a great story, though. Quite enjoy it.
It was quite amusing, yeah.
Well, the record's out. Loads of Money is doing extremely well in the charts. You're going to take all these characters of yours out on tour?
Yes, I'm going to do a tour in October and November. Not until then, I'm afraid.
How's that going to work? Is Stavros going to be there as well?
Yes, Stavros will be there, and lots of money. This bloke, lots of money. I don't know who he is, but apparently he's going to be there.